We've done your chip lunch, and then you were on one with Hudson.
Yeah.
Is that all the chip lunches you
Yeah.
did?
And that was really early.
Oh no, but you were the third person on a couple, weren't you?
Yes. Oh yes, yeah. I jumped in when you were studying. So old.
So old. That's what we are here on the Chip Lunch podcast. Aggregate age of, what is it? You could work it out. Welcome back, everyone. Hang on. 38 plus 29?
Yep.
38 plus 29. 60, 67.
Oh, we're just talking our aggregate age.
Yeah, and then we'll add Tim's.
Okay. So 60.
Is that 67? Is that right? Get a calculator out, will you?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not.
Come on, maths genius.
Exactly.
Me?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
you fathered one.
Yeah. I think I fathered one. It doesn't mean I am one. 67, that's right. And then how old are you? Sorry.
42.
42. 109. 109.
Divided by 3.
Luca is helping us out.
36. Oh, that makes you feel really,
average age
really young.
36. Yeah. That's not bad.
Yeah.
For podcasting.
For a podcast.
If it was a sports team, it would be like, oh,
unless lawn bowls, and then it would be killing it.
Yeah, that's true.
Who was the oldest Olympian? I think maybe last Olympics one before was he was in sailing. I think it was a 70-something-year-old, but because he was part of the sailing team, like it
makes sense.
Different kind of
old people
athleticism.
have boats.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that was the point, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's definitely the lesson from that point.
I was just thinking that who was that older dude who was the shooter?
Noah.
When he just had the
Turkish guy.
Yeah, Turkish. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was funny.
He was.
Anyway, welcome back, Tim, to the Chip Lunch podcast.
Thank you.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well.
Welcome back to your country of origin.
Yes, that is true.
You've been in the United States of America.
I have. Yeah, it's been very exciting.
Just
meandering across.
Just on a junket.
Just
on a gap year.
a gap week.
Yeah, 10 days, was it? 10 days?
It was about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where did you go?
Oh, I went to
Which is why we have you on this podcast, sorry.
That's right. Yeah, the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Is it called a Commonwealth?
I think it is. I think it's a Commonwealth. Anyway, the state.
Oh,
you can check that. We can fact check that.
I'll do it right now. Fact check it right now. But you can keep talking.
Yeah, so I went to Kentucky. So in particular, a small little town called Wilmore, which has a university and a seminary in it called Asbury Seminary.
Oh, is this the revival place?
It is the revival place. I'm going to use this in my sermon on the weekend, which people will hear before this podcast.
Okay.
Spoilers. No spoilers.
No spoilers, because you'll all have heard it.
Yeah. Spoiler.
If you
alert, no spoilers.
If you are at one of the congregations where I'm preaching.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, when I hear about like college towns in America, I kind of think like Wollongong. Yeah. Like Wollongong is a university town. Okay. It's a university town. So I was expecting something about the size of Wollongong, and no. This is kind of like imagine Jamboree had a university of 3,000 people, and that's it. Like there is nothing else going on in Wilmore. Beautiful small town, but there's literally nothing else going on in Wilmore other than. And so for 3 months of the year, when it's summer break, there's nothing happening.
They wouldn't be controlling the action.
They would not be controlling the action. No. There were 2 cafes, a incredibly small IGA, a really nice Mexican restaurant,
IGA.
far less nice.
An IGA.
It was an IGA. Yeah.
An Independent Grocers Australia.
I imagine America, Independent Grocers America, kind of like the ABC. And most excitingly, a really random Hot Wheels store that just had tens of thousands of Hot Wheels in it, and that was kind of it.
I'm just going to say, sorry, Matchbox cars are much higher quality than Hot Wheels cars.
Oh, interesting. There was one small wall of Matchbox and a couple of other brands, but almost exclusively it was Hot Wheels.
Because I think Matchbox might be British.
But Matchbox doesn't come in the metal tins anymore. We found this out when we had
Did they used to come in metal
recently.
tins?
Yeah, Matchbox came in like legit.
In an actual metal Matchbox.
I think I bought a lot of them in plastic.
That's so good.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And I'm older than you guys.
Yeah,
we found that out.
Yeah, found that out.
We're all the same age.
Well above
We're all
the average
36.
Yeah. Hot Wheels store.
Yes.
Leading the way.
And it was great. It was so there was a guy there, maybe about 36, kind of mid 30-year-old guy running the joint, and it was kind of like we talk a lot about third places, just the places you just go and hang out. He had like 3 mates who were just hanging out in the store, just chatting away with him. It was very much a third place. He just happened to work there, but they were just chatting around very slowly. He's kind of unpacking boxes but he handed a whole pile to his mates. Oh, do you know, just chuck that on the wall over there? And they were just carrying on the conversation. I was wandering the store trying to find a matchbox for each of my members of my family to bring home.
Yeah.
Very small. So yes, my idea of what a college town is has now radically changed. It's not Wollongong. It's more like Jamboree with a university in it.
What Hot Wheels did you buy representing?
Yeah. So
family, and then we'll get into which one we think Joel would be.
Oh yeah, what? Yeah. Okay. So I bought a Batmobile for myself, 1960.
That's unsurprising.
Yeah. Roz, I bought a Fast and Furious. What is it? The Charger. Yeah. From Dom's Charger.
Dodge Charger. Yep.
Yeah.
Family.
Family. It's all about family.
Family.
Micaiah, I got a. Oh yeah, I was proud of this one. It was a Kung Fu Panda noodle truck.
Yes, that's so good.
And then Zali was the hardest one because they had heaps of different like kind of pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
But nothing that Zali's kind of into. So
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't really kind of work that one out. But Zali loves horses. She's really keen to be a farmer when she grows up and have a farm. And so I talked to the guys and I said, oh look, what would be, this is horse country, this is the middle of horse country in Kentucky. And I said, what would be the kind of classic American farm truck that you would have? Like if I just went off to one of these farms and they got really excited. So they're buzzing around the store and they're finding all these different ones and they bring a whole selection back. And they're, oh, this one, oh no, not that one. That one's blah, blah, blah. And like, they have this debate amongst themselves about which one. And they landed on a couple different kind of utes and stuff. Yeah. And one of them was Aqua, which is one of Zali's favourites. So I bought an Aqua farm ute for Zali, and so she was stuck with that.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. But I mean, there was just like an overwhelming number of possibilities in this store.
Yeah.
Okay, what
Hot Wheels are you, Joel?
Yeah, what Hot Wheels would you be, Joel?
Oh, that's a really tough question to ask.
I'm feeling race car, like
right,
something.
Well, if
Formula
I could pick
1?
my favourite road car, is a BMW E30 M3. So that's from the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And it's like that kind of boxy looking BMW, because that's the first car that I was like, that's like when I was younger, that's like the first car that I really hung on to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
That's
the one I would like. But see, this is my thing, is I don't know if Hot Wheels do that. I don't know if they do official cars.
Matchbox do the more legit cars.
Yeah, that's why I like Matchbox more.
Okay.
I used to go down to David Jones in Miranda Fair, Westfield, and spend my pocket money on Matchbox cars. Yeah. I have a whole crate full of them. Yeah. And I think we donated all the ones I don't like to church. The ones they work though. They work. I should say they work. They're not broken. But yes, that's what I would choose. What about you?
That's very cool. I do not. I would say that I'm not a lover of cars, so I wouldn't have a particular thing that like straight away jumps to mind.
Not Poe's Fast Noodles truck here that I found, which is what you
I
got.
probably would have landed in the pop culture section of the Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
I think Hot Wheels have been more pop culturally.
Yeah. There were things, and there were lots of like 80s pop culture. Yeah. So there was like a whole He-Man collection. Yeah. And all sorts of crazy stuff.
I have a Hot Wheels that has sentimental value that is still in the packaging that my grandma kept the joke going with all of her grandchildren that she would buy them a car when they turned 16. And we all got a Hot Wheels when we turned 16. Cool. And so I think it's like a Porsche or a white Porsche or something. So my grandma bought me a Porsche, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'd say for sentimental reasons, probably that car.
Yeah, that's nice.
Don't really care about Porsches.
I think it might have been. Yeah, I'll look that up. It might be a 956. Anyway.
Yeah, it's some kind of white Porsche. But yeah. Thanks, Grandma.
That 956, I was wrong. I forget what it's called.
Well, we are on the Chip Lunch podcast.
We are.
So, and we're talking about Kentucky. I don't remember originally, Tim, what your chip preference was.
Revisit.
Back in the day. But you've had, not only did you have, and I'm sure we'll get into it, quite a number of great conversations, great gospel conversations, great academic conversations around this foray into Kentucky. You also had a chip revelation.
I did have a chip revelation.
I received a photo.
Yeah, Joel got a photo. I was sitting in Atlanta airport, having my flight being delayed, and trying to find somewhere for dinner, and I ended up in Ludacris's Chicken and Beer.
Is that what it's called?
It's what it's called.
Like
it's
Ludacris the rapper.
Yeah, Ludacris the rapper, which Roz got really excited about so because he's in the Fast and Furious series.
He is.
But they don't serve chips with their burgers. They serve tater tots.
Oh.
And I mean, I'm always a bit partial to your potato royale or your potato jam, as you might call them in Australia. But they came out and they were like seasoned and came with a really nice tomato sauce. And I thought this is golden. More Australian stores need to serve seasoned tater tots with their burgers. So that was my chip revelation.
It looked good.
Yeah.
They were really good. Yeah. And then on my way home, I had a significant layover in LA, and found right next to my gate was Ludacris's Chicken and Beer.
He's following you.
And so I'm like, here we go. So I did it again. It was great. So on the way there and on the way back.
Song? He's got a couple.
I actually don't know any of his songs. I just know him from the Fast and Furious.
Get out the way. Get out the way. It looks good though, Brandon. Check it out.
Yeah.
It's a good looking meal.
It was a decent burger, and the tater tots were cooked to perfection.
They look seasoned.
They were seasoned really well. Yeah, they had like big clumps of salt and rosemary and a few other things. It was quite nice.
It's Napoleon Dynamite where he's got the potato tots in the pocket of his pants.
I can't remember. It's been years.
He's like, the bully's trying to get him to give him some and then he doesn't, so he kicks him in the leg and smushes them into his...
I don't remember that.
That's what I think of when I think of tots, like that American kind of word for it specifically.
Okay.
It's like,
Napoleon,
give me some of your tots. Like that.
Because we know them as potato gems.
Yes. Potato gems, yeah.
Yes.
But these look delicious.
They were really good, yeah.
And what's the burger you got there?
Oh, it was a chicken burger, but pickles and good stuff. It was good.
What do they call it a biscuit? What do they call it?
No, a sandwich.
Sandwich.
Yeah, it's a chicken sandwich, which is a burger. Because for them, burger is beef.
Yeah.
So if you put something else on there, it's not a burger; it's now a sandwich. That confused me a couple of times. It was just, I don't want a chicken sandwich. I want a chicken burger, but this doesn't seem to be on the menu. But I realised it was after all. Yeah. Few oddities. One of the other things I realised, I don't know if this is widespread in America, but I visited a friend of the podcast, Timothy Paul Jones. And TPJ. Hung out with TPJ for a couple of days. And driving around Louisville, where he is, and they're redoing some of their streets. And I can't remember what he called them, but basically roundabouts. Yeah. And we realised that America, well, at least in Louisville, his experience is America doesn't do roundabouts.
They don't.
Yeah, they don't.
I thought that was weird. And it was mind-blowing to me that two cultures who are so similar in so many ways can end up with these weird little oddities that they do a whole lot of four-way stops. Which I find super confusing. Who goes? Oh, I guess you got here first. I don't know.
So I believe that used to be the case in Australia until they installed roundabouts.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's an English thing or British thing, roundabouts. I think that's where they came from.
Yeah.
Which is, after the Americans
why they're a bit
kicked
slow.
them out, they didn't want to.
Yeah.
They were like,
none of this rubbish.
Not putting a circle in the road.
But Louisville is discovering the roundabout.
Are they?
Yeah. So,
the funny thing was you'd have to go around the other way. In America.
Yes, well, I did hire a car.
Yes.
While I was over there. And so that was my first time driving in America and on the incorrect side of the road.
Incorrect.
Well, I was going to say the wrong side of the road, but they would say, no, it's the right side of the road because it is literally the right side of the road.
Oh, yeah.
So the incorrect side of the road. So that super confused. Like, which door do you get into?
You had a few mishaps.
Yeah, a few mishaps. Incorrect doorage. And what else did I notice? Actually, the thing I wasn't, because I was mentally prepared for, okay, you're driving on this side of the road. Yeah. Turning intersections, I'm focusing because
that's when you've got to do it. You're like, I'm going over there.
In the lanes. The bit I wasn't kind of prepared for was the fact that they also swap over the indicator and the windscreen wiper.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
So the number of times that I'm wiping my windscreen or as I'm trying to turn a corner or, indicating in the wet weather. So sorry, that was the bit that confused me the most, I think.
You didn't happen to visit the Louisville Slugger Baseball Museum?
No, a number of people mentioned the Slugger Museum. I didn't get there.
It's a famous baseball bat.
Yeah.
It's made in the 1880s.
There you go.
That's when it started.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously, for Australians, a lot of older establishments, and older buildings. Now, I'm sure that when the British come over, they go, "Oh, you call that old?"
Yeah.
We have churches that are 2,000 years old. But for Australians, like there's a lot of infrastructure and companies and those kinds of things which are have a much longer history than we have.
And that area like Kentucky is the industrial heartland really of where the Industrial Revolution took place in America.
Oh, did it?
All that, like that area like that and Cleveland and all that kind of area is
right.
That was the main industry area of America.
Okay.
Is it part of would we say it's part of the Rust Belt? I think it might be.
I don't know. How far is it away from the kind of Detroit?
It's kind of,
I'm not very good with my geography.
Cincinnati's north of that, so Ohio was a really big town of that.
Okay.
And that's where like what's his name, Rockefeller. That's where a lot of that came from.
He was in Cincinnati.
Yeah. Oh no, he was in more Ohio.
Oh right.
In that area, and that's where the train lines expanded industry a lot in that area.
Oh okay, yes, yeah. There are a few
oil
train
production.
lines around. Like I passed through a few different towns that had the big train lines. But again, all industrial stuff, not commercial, like not commuter trains, just all the heavy rail.
It's an ongoing problem in a lot of America. Not much public transport.
No.
So what brought you to Wilmore?
Yeah, so I've been part of a conference for a number of years now called Intergenerate. So this was started by Holly Allen, who wrote basically the textbook on intergenerational ministry. Uh-huh. And so she started a conference to talk about these kinds of things. So the first one of those was 2017. I didn't know about it then, but then one of our mutual friends, who's an Australian, Tammy, got Holly out to Australia 2018. And so that's where I met her. And we realised that we both... So at that time, YouthWorks was really getting into... We'd read Holly's book. We were getting into intergenerational ministry. And we were realising that this language of intergenerational ministry was the kind of language of how at YouthWorks we were trying to express what effective youth and children's ministry looks like. Yeah. So for years, under Graham Stanton and many others, had been talking against what's popularly called the one-eared Mickey Mouse. So if you can imagine a Mickey Mouse head with just one ear. And so this was an image from the early 90s, I think, maybe late 80s. Youth ministry practitioner wrote up an article and said, the church body is kind of like the head, the main church, and youth ministry gets pushed out to be the one ear that's kind of connected to the church body but not really. Yeah. And so we were very familiar with that idea and have been teaching that for a long time, that while we want specialised kids and youth ministry because we think that's valuable, we don't want one that's separated from the church. And then this language of intergenerationality sort of became popular by that sort of mid to late 2010s. And we realised as a staff team at YouthWorks, this is the language that we've been looking for. This is what we've been saying for ages of, we don't want youth and kids to only be in their specialised ministry in a way that's disconnected. Yeah. We want them to be integrated in some way. And so we picked up that idea. We loved Holly Allen's book. And so, she invited me across to the 2019 conference. Yeah, so I first got invited to go over and run a paper in the 2019 conference. It runs every second year. 2021 was COVID year, so I didn't run, or they ran online, but with American time zones, I didn't really partake of that one. Yeah. And then went back 2023, did another paper, and then got accepted to do another paper this year. So
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I've been slowly kind of investigating in that, my own curiosity. It's basically just an excuse for me to think about and force the right stuff of intergenerational ministry. Why does it work? And my big curiosity is what is going on at kind of a sociological and developmental level that makes intergenerational ministry work, particularly for kids, because that's been my focus. So heaps of the people there are thinking about practice, and they're thinking about creative techniques for integrating all ages into different parts of your ministry, blah, blah, blah. And I just say, I don't care how you do it. I'm just really interested in why it works. So my papers are much more theoretical. But there is a bit of an appetite for that among some of them, and particularly so Holly Allen, she spent a lot of her PhD looking at developmental theories like Vygotsky and others that I've kind of realised that, oh yeah, this makes sense. So her and I get along really well and chat about this kind of nerdy end of the discussion, which is really fun. So I went across and did that. So yeah, it was a kind of a 4-day, 3 days plus one conference. There was an extra global day for those who were coming from overseas. We got to hang out a bit.
A global day?
Yeah. So one of the things, another mate of mine, Chris Barnett, who's from Melbourne, he's been attached to the conference right from the very start. And one of the things he noticed was, firstly, there was a growing number of non-Americans coming to the conference, which was really exciting. But also when people came for the first time, they sometimes felt a bit overwhelmed of like, I don't know what to expect in this American context, and they're having different conversations, and there's just culture shock. And so he decided this year for the first time to run the day before the conference started a global track, where he just said, if you're coming from overseas, come for an extra day, and let's just talk about the global conversation. What's it like to be a non-American in a primarily American space? What are the conversations that are the same? What are the conversations that are different? So that was really helpful as well. So the people from New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Hong Kong, Canada, UK, Argentina, who were all kind of part of this, and Australia.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And did you spoke at the conference, didn't you?
So I spoke, yeah. So I did. I delivered a paper, yeah.
What does delivering a paper mean, though? You just give people the newspaper?
I think
extra. Read all about it.
What it's supposed to mean.
Ministry is here, and we're going to shout it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Keep going.
I think what it's supposed to mean is that you've written a paper, and then you talk about the paper at the conference.
Wow.
What?
Well, groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking. Yeah.
This is what they.
Thankfully, what no one has quite realised, and luckily this is a private conversation between friends, is that when I say I'm writing a paper, it means that I've done a whole lot of reading, and the night before I smash together a PowerPoint and talk about it.
Smash it. Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Well, you also wrote a book.
I did write a book. Yeah.
Please put it up on the screen.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
The Child in God's Church.
The Child in God's Church. Faith-formative relationships that grow disciples who know, love and obey King Jesus.
Available at all good bookstores.
In Australia.
In Australia.
Yeah, and UK.
Oh, and UK now?
Yeah, so UK, there's a youthworks.media.co.uk store. So for all of our friends who are listening from the UK. What YouthWorks doesn't have at the moment is good physical distribution in the United States. So the Kindle's available. You can go onto the American Amazon store and get it on Kindle. But I took over 50 copies and sold them all or gave them away, depending on. Yeah, a few of them were gifts for people.
Yeah. What was your luggage allowance? Did that fit into?
So I packed up my suitcase. Was it 23 kilos or something it's allowed to be? So it was 22 kilos. Nearly all of that was books and a couple of spare T-shirts.
And some undies.
Yeah. And then I also, as my carry-on, had another box in my arms, extra books, which when I first arrived in LA, walked past a very scary customs officer.
Yeah.
With his big chain and badge, prominent. He goes, "What's in the box?" I'm like, books.
What's in the box today?
And he goes, "Oh, okay." And that was it. Right, cool.
Okay, books. Allowed.
Yeah. So that was fun.
What was the main thrust of your presentation?
Yeah, okay. So I have been reading a lot about the idea of collective memory.
Yes.
And so we talked about this a bit before.
We have.
I kind of did it at another conference last year in Chicago. I did a very similar idea. So I've just taken that idea a little bit further. But the idea is that groups have these memories that hold them together and define who you are as a group.
Yeah.
That's the basic idea. So you can think of this at a big national level. So like at a national level, like Australia, we have Anzac Day. So Anzac Day is, we have these collective memories of Gallipoli, the Anzacs, and all the stories that are kind of attached to that. And we rehearse these stories together. So every year we come together, we talk about the stories, we rehearse the stories, we go to the monuments, we remember our veterans, and part of that is our collective, so that's part of Australia's collective memory of these stories of Gallipoli. And the idea is that these should shape who we are. So it's not just interesting factoids about the past. These are memories we consciously retell ourselves so that we know how to live today as Australians and how to live in the future as Australians. So they should be teaching us values and characteristics and virtues and the kinds of, who do we want Australians to be? We want people who are courageous and in the face of, unmitigated odds, persevere. And, even though Anzac Day is a celebration of a complete disaster, militarily, we find some of our core identity in that. And so that's an example of a collective memory. And then you could go all the way down to sort of a family unit. So your family units have little collective memories. So family stories, holidays you've been on, all those kind of stories you retell yourself. And again, they should be, or what they're doing is they're forming value and purpose and virtue and character. So we are the kind of family who loves to holiday in the bush, because we are the family that loves the outdoors and loves, touching grass and those kinds of things. And so your kids are growing up to go, oh, that's right, that's who I am. I'm a kid that loves touching grass and being out in nature, because I keep being told in my family, and we do things every year that remind us that that's the kind of family we are, or whatever it might be. So that's the base, that's the broad theory. I'm saying, oh, okay, that's kind of what's working in a church. So we have these collective memories. We have the, and then actually a coffee the day before, Darren Pratt, a friend of mine, we had this really stimulating conversation. He gave me this framework, which was brilliant. So he's like, there's these 5 concentric circles of religious memory. And this was brilliant to me. So the most outer circle is the stories of the Bible. So these are the narratives of the Old Testament and Jesus and the Gospel. So that's our first collective memory, that we keep retelling those stories, because we want to be like Jesus, or we want to be like the disciples in these and not like the disciples in these ways. And those kind of, so they're our stories. And the next one in is church history. So all the things that God has done amongst his people since the closing of the biblical canon. The next circle in is your particular denomination. So we are Reformed, we're Protestant, but we're also Anglican. So there's a whole lot of stories about what that means and things we want to go on. Then the next circle in is your local church. So Soul Revival has stories of who we are. And particularly for those, those who are listening, if you want to go back to the first couple of seasons of The Shock Absorber, for example, that's a good example where you and Stu were sitting down and telling the story of Soul Revival within this kind of collective memory type way. And then the inner circle is your particular family. So the Beale Hart's family, the McMaster family, so the Wall family. So that each of you have got particular stories there. So those 5 concentric circles was really helpful. So I'm really thankful to Darren to give me that insight just before I gave the paper, because I could put that in. So they're the kind of collective memories we're telling ourselves. And again, with the idea of, okay, if we're raising young people in the church, who do we want them to be? We want them to be friends of Jesus. We want them to be friends with each other, love God, love others. We want them to have lifelong faith. And how do we actually help them to do that? Well, we tell these stories of collective memory and we live out of those. So that was the basic idea.
Yeah. Did you get a good response from that?
Yeah, I think we were pretty encouraging. Yeah. It was good. Lots of good conversations. And one of the things that came up was, what do you do with it when you're with negative stories or things that...
like bad experiences?
Yeah, bad experiences or harm that's happened in the church. So we had a bit of a conversation about, the time that Christianity and the church has got it wrong, like, the Christians who supported slavery or the Crusades, or this is part of our collective memory, like it's part of our history. How do you you live in light of that. And it's kind of the same. It's just like, well, we retell these stories so that we don't live that way. Like we recognize what went wrong.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is also because you've got this outer circle of biblical stories, we can assess all the little stories in light of that. So how do we know that the Crusades probably like got it wrong in terms of understanding what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? Well, because we can go back to the teachings of Jesus and we say, do these line up? Just because they carry the name Christian doesn't mean what they did was inherently Christian in its ethic.
Yeah.
And so you can do that. And again, you can do that all the way in. Like,
well, that's the same with, it's the same with individuals in that way. It's
absolutely.
Like you have plenty of negative either family unit memories or your own memories, and then hopefully you're learning from those experiences that then inform the future.
Totally.
So that makes perfect sense that you have those negative, maybe negative's probably maybe it is the right word, for those kind of negative kind of cultural memories would lead to a similar, hopefully, reflection and then...
Absolutely. Yeah. And we do this when we do like marriage prep with people, right? Like you talk, when you do a marriage prep, you ask people, okay, what are some things from your family of origin, memories of your parents' marriage that you want to bring into your marriage? And what are things that you've noticed about your parents' marriage you don't want to bring into your marriage? So it's the same kind of thing. It's looking at who am I? I've got these collective memories of my family, and there are things that I intentionally want to take on and things that I want to leave behind. And this is the other interesting thing which brought up the topic of shock absorbing particularly, was that you're constantly reassessing your memories. So then they don't stay static.
Yes.
You keep reinterpreting them.
Yeah.
And each generation has to work with the other generations to keep reinterpreting these ideas.
Yeah.
So I didn't go there to talk about shock absorber, but we ended up there anyway. And I got to talk Stu up and share a little bit about that idea, because it is this idea that, well, as the younger generations are coming up, you have to reinterpret these stories again, because they need to make it alive for them. So there's still, and particularly as Christians, there's the norming norm of the Bible. They talk like you don't change the theology, but you have to keep reinterpreting it, because today is not 50 years ago.
The world changes.
The world changes, exactly. And then we kind of, as we were batting this around in the seminar, I said, okay, well, one of the other examples for us is Australia. So we've got Anzac Day, so that's one thing. But the other thing for us as Australians is the idea of Australia Day. And so in the last sort of 10 years particularly, this heightened idea of, well, is it Australia Day? Is it Invasion Day? Is it like, so there's a particular fact of history that the British came and put a flag in Botany Bay and said, all right, it's now British. How do we continue to reinterpret that day? So there's a memory there of an actual historic event, but we reinterpret and we keep assessing and reshaping what it is. Is that a day to be super proud of because Australia just wouldn't be the 21st century Western nation it is without that day? Or is it a day of mourning because, of all the things that the British did in colonialisation and, the destruction of Aboriginal societies? And so we're kind of in this moment now of reassessing this collective memory and going, how are we going to talk about this? Are we going to talk about it positively, negatively, mixture, both? But that's kind of the stuff. And so again, when it comes to the church, we've got it in our history. We've got the way that Soul Revival was established and some of the sadness and pain that came out of leaving one church and establishing another. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, yes. But part of it is, but that's part of our collective memory. They're the stories that shape our church. And we are passing those on to our kids and we're helping them to grow up to learn what does it mean to be a Christian, part of a church, Anglican, part of Soul Revival, and part of our unique family, those 5 circles. And part of that story is how Soul Revival started 13 years ago. And what did that mean? So, Anyway, it's kind of fun. It was the kind of stuff that I get excited about, obviously. And there's others there that kind of nerd out in that stuff as well. So, it's good.
I was just looking at Kentucky's call to Commonwealth.
Yeah.
For historical and symbolic reasons. So when Kentucky became a state, which is in 1792, it chose to describe itself as the Commonwealth of Kentucky in its constitution.
Obviously, I'll pick that up somewhere.
Wanted to emphasise the government was based on the common good of the people and not the power of a monarch or ruling class.
There you go.
Yeah. Did you see that in action?
Well, the last weekend I was there was when they were doing, Trump held his military parade for Flag Day.
Whatever they call the King's Parade.
Yeah, then there was the whole No Kings protest, which was a sort of anti-Trump protest as well. So that was kind of on the news. And depending which channel you watched, depending which demonstration you saw. Mm-hmm. So if you look at CNN, there was no coverage of Trump's military parade. It was only covering the No Kings parades. Okay. And you go to Fox, there was no comment at all about the other. Everything was all about how wonderful it was that Trump was doing his military parade. And yeah, it was fascinating.
Thinking, I don't know if this is meant to turn into a Q&A of what you were talking about.
No, go for it.
Just jumping off what you were just talking about. Is there anything said about sharing collective memory? So as you have new maybe members joining that church, how does that then inform sharing those memories as you then, that new person enters that environment? Is there anything on that?
Yeah. So you have the collective memory, which is kind of the relatively static but always being reinterpreted collection. Yeah. But that process you're talking about is then called collective remembering. Yeah. And so that's exactly right, that we collectively remember together. Yeah. And again, as I'm reading this stuff, I'm just like, oh, this is what, Stu does intuitively. Yeah. And I think back to all the blahs that we did when we were a youth team at Gaimir, and even now when Stu preaches and sometimes tells those stories, and just over and over again, reestablishing those stories of, Soul Revival started with him and Lou being asked to do this, and the garage and the brown paint on the wall because they mixed all the paint colours together, and all of these stories that those who've been Soul Revival for a while know. Yeah. And this, what he's doing is this collective remembering. It's sharing these stories together, and we now take those on. So none of us were part of that garage with the brown paint on the wall, but they are part of our story because we have been there while you collectively remember. So the collective remembering.
Oh, it's an interesting idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of like when a new member, the easiest example I can think of is like when someone gets a new boyfriend or girlfriend partner and they come to family dinner and all of a sudden like the same 3 or 4 stories start coming out.
Yes.
That are obviously your family's like collected memory, but it's like, oh, now we're sharing it with this new person who doesn't know them because we need to embarrass someone or whatever.
Yeah. Well, no, but like even the embarrassment is part of actually the knitting together.
Yeah, exactly.
So by embarrassing Braden when he goes over to the Croucher household and they, or embarrassing Beck because Braden's now here and they're sharing all those stories again. They're actually knitting you into the family. They want you to be sharing, and they want their stories that you weren't a part of to now be part of your story. Yeah. And so the next stage after that is called the autobiographical self. So this is the stories we tell about ourselves. Who do I think I am? Yeah. Because of the stories of basically the story I've written of who Tim Beilhartz is. And so all of these collective memories of being an Australian, being a Christian, being an Anglican, being a soul revivalist since I was in youth group, or actually even before that, like when I was in kids' church and I had Peter Crawshaw and Adam Darvell as my kids' church leaders. Didn't know it at the time, but I was already being brought into soul revival because of who my leaders were when I was in year 5 and year 6. And so that is now part of my narrative. And so all of that is kind of happening.
How does that idea of collective memory then transfer over to helping you think about kids ministry?
So I think, so this is again, my big question, my meta question, I suppose, is why does intergenerational ministry work for kids? In actually helping them to be disciples of Jesus. And this is a little segment of the answer because it's this is what we're doing. When we tell stories of Jesus with kids, we're not just telling stories. We're actually inviting them into and bringing them into the collective memory that Christians have had for 2,000 years of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, with the aim of them knitting those stories into their autobiographical self. So, Leo comes along and he's like, oh, this story of Jesus or creation or Noah or whatever it is actually part of my heritage, is part of who I am, to be knitted into the same story as Noah and Moses and Jesus, and of, as well as like at the very family level, Joel and Karen, and then part of therefore Soul Revival Church. And so that story of, Christians who decided, 4 Christians who sat around and decided they wanted to love God and love others as they sat in a garage painted with brown paint, is part of Leo's story.
Yeah.
As part of who Leo is.
Yeah.
And so why does this intergenerational storytelling work for faith formation? Because you're not just siloing them off as, the one-eared Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
You're bringing them into the whole intergenerational body of Christ.
Yeah.
Because all of those stories matter.
Yep.
And all of those stories, we want, our kids to own those stories for themselves. That's the really exciting bit. So that's kind of giving me clues of, what's happening sociologically, what's happening developmentally as we raise kids. And these kind of theories, even though most of them are designed by people who aren't Christians.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that is making sense. Like we can kind of investigate this from a sociological level and go, that's what's going on. So, and the better we do that and help them to understand these stories, the more sticky these stories of faith become.
Yeah.
So if you kind of bring in the Holy Spirit into here, I mean, obviously the Holy Spirit can do what he wants. But I think what we're investigating as we study these things is, how does the Spirit typically work in raising disciples of Jesus? Yeah. He uses these types of processes. Like this is his normal way of working. Doesn't have to. He's free to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
But this is the typical way that the Holy Spirit works in communities and in families to help children know the stories of Jesus, own the stories of Jesus, continue being disciples themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something really cool that tying it into the podcast that we're on, the like kind of collective memory that we get to kind of discover as we're chatting to people on Chip Lunch is like, there's all these things under the surface and all of these webs and connectors to people's lives that you don't even really know are there until you sit down and talk to someone. And we just happen to do that with a camera and someone recording. But like often those conversations, I think, a week away, because that's normally when you have a long kind of more time to like sit down with someone, but happens every week over meals or even just to chat after church, is you get to sit down and have those memories with people that then they're either sharing things that have happened or you start creating the new memories. I think that's why I encourage doing youth ministry or late night or anything at church is, cool, here's another chance God's given us to create those collective memories together every week. And though the amount of weeks that I've been at church or done late night or done youth ministry is quite high, for some people, like this is just getting started and you get to have both ends of those spectrum working together, which is really cool.
Absolutely. I was thinking about Chip Lunch while I was over there, because one of the conversations is, how do you help older generations continue to be part of the whole church, and how do you help their stories keep informing the church?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the Chip Lunches, and particularly ones like Pam Bogus's Chip Lunch, and the opportunity Pam had before she passed away to tell her story, and the number of people, I think you were saying, Braden, or a couple of people were saying that at her funeral, or the week after her funeral, the number of people who had said, I listened to Pam's podcast this week as I was thinking about her. And, I think Chip Lunch is actually a really exciting way that we're able to help, what's the tagline? Stories of Jesus changing everything. Yeah. Like this is us knitting our church together and providing an opportunity where all generations, all ages can actually share their stories for the sake of helping the church continue to grow together.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. Like and particularly for our older saints, like one of the generational theories is that as people get into the sort of the last 20 years of their life, statistically speaking, something switches and they want to be generative. They want to actually, so while the sort of middle years is often kind of, how do I establish myself? How do I be successful in my career? How do I, those kind of things. As you get to the last sort of 15, 20 years of your life, you start thinking, oh, well, I've done that bit. Now I'm interested in leaving a legacy and helping be a generative force to those who are younger. How do I help younger generations live into the things that I've learned? Like, I don't want to just die without having passed on some of the things that I've learned about my life. And so I think here, and particularly some of the ones we have done with our older saints, are doing that. Like, it's helping people tell their stories and sharing their life and their legacy and their lessons that they've learned. And, I love the question you always ask, Joel, at the end of, what would you say to your younger self? Because that's the question, right? That's the what have I learned? Like, what wisdom can I pass down? Because I can't actually tell my younger self this, but the younger people who are that younger than me who are listening, may pick up some of these ideas. And maybe I don't have to wait till I'm 80 to learn to pray more or to trust God in hard circumstances. Maybe as a 40-year-old listening to an 80-year-old story, I can already start to inhabit some of those thought patterns and practices already. So, all right, 2 years' time, Joel, come over and do a seminar on the chip lunch.
That'd be pretty fun. Yeah, you could just use it as you deliver a paper.
Yeah, but no, I think particularly as I read some of this theory, and I also hang out with people at this conference, more and more I'm realizing there's stuff that we're doing, not necessarily accidentally, but I don't think we've necessarily
intuitive kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe it's intuitive, but we haven't mined the reason why these things work the way they do. But I just keep, I'm reading theory and I'm reading these sociologists, and I was telling Stu, like, I'm reading this guy that died in 1945.
Is he a dead Russian?
He's not a dead Russian. No, he's a dead Frenchman. Okay. But he's writing sort of early 20th century, and I'm reading his stuff and circling. I'm going, commitments. This is commitments. And I'm reading something. I'm certainly like, this is the shock absorber. Like, he's talking about the shock absorber in the 1920s, 1930s, and I just think, this is it. Like, and again, it just helps us to see what we're doing is not random. And it's also like they're so well thought out, not because Stu knew about Maurice Halbwachs, from the 1930s and the stuff that he was writing, but because and it just realizes there's good reason why this works.
Yeah,
and people who have not thought about soul revival have just the sort of co-thinking, parallel thinking, like discovering some of these ideas, and it also just I think legitimizes for me as we keep this experiment of our church going and things like shock absorber podcasting and chip lunch podcasting, our commitments meetings that we're trying to get cranking again this year, all of these different things that we do. And I read these people and I just go, this is why it works. Like, we kind of know that it works because we've been doing it for 35 years.
Yeah.
But this is why. There's good theology behind it. There's good theory behind it. And it gets me really excited, obviously, you can tell, because I'm just like, this is it. It kind of legitimizes for me this experiment that, under God, Stu has been leading us in for 35 years. Now so many other people have bought into it and go, we value this. And this is why. You could easily do a paper presentation on the Chip Lunch podcast and what it's doing and why it's doing it. Like, people would froth over this at the conference because they're looking for ideas and they're looking for ways to help different generations come together and share their stories and be generative to each other. It's awesome. Yeah,
it's really cool. I was going to ask you though, because you're in Kentucky and you're at Asbury, did you see anything about the revival that was there?
Yeah, so there's Asbury Seminary and there's Asbury Universities, and they're technically two different institutions, but obviously founded by the people who bouncing off the same idea. So Bishop Asbury was a Methodist bishop, and So there's so their heritage is kind of Anglicanism, Methodism, but they're quite broad in terms of denomination. But yes, so I'm writing this up for my sermon at the moment. So in February 2023, there was just a chapel service. So the seminary is for Bible college students, those who are learning sort of Bible theology degrees, and the university is one of these Christian liberal arts universities that we don't really have in Australia, but you can go and do your arts degree, your history degree, your literature degree, your science degree, your whatever. I told Zali they've got an equine science degree, so I was like, you can go and study horse science over there. But with an explicitly Christian focus. And so one of the things, if you're a university student, you have to go to chapel 3 times a week. And so it was one of these chapel services, just an hour chapel service on I think it's 8th of February, I think it is, 2023. And it was a very, very normal service. The guy who preached, very, very ordinary sermon, nothing very particularly spectacular about it. But as you know, most of the students flowed out, 19 students stayed around and just kept praying. And then kept praying. And then were confessing sins to each other and started singing, and slowly people kind of kept wandering back in and go, you guys still going? Do you mind if I join? And then over the next few hours, it started to bubble out of, hey, we're still praying. We're still kind of, praising. Now, because of their heritage of sort of a Methodism, revivalism kind of stuff, I think they were kind of primed in a way, like in their thinking to go, oh, is this...
Their collective memory?
Their collective memory, yeah, exactly. Their collective memory is one of, celebrating revivals. And they've had significant revival events like this.
But there'd been one there in
1970. Yeah. And predating that as well. So they've had a number of times where they've had these significant moments of outpouring, revival, renewal, something going. So something extraordinarily spiritual seems to go on. And so, they were, in a way, they were kind of primed for this, thinking, oh, this might be something. And so people started coming back. And basically it for the next 16 days, it was a non-stop chapel service. And people would come and they would, when early, in the first couple of days, people would bring their mattresses from their dorms and so they could kind of hang out there but not miss anything, even if they were dozing in and out. But then news started to spread. And so then the local news got onto it. People were visiting. In the end, again, this tiny, tiny town, it's got like 2 traffic lights, about the size of Jamberoo and about the infrastructure of like Jamberoo Village, had 70,000 people come from across America and across the world come in. So you got these photos of these massive crowds. So anyway, so I saw the building where it was, and I've got a mate who works at the sociology department in that university, and he took me inside. So we just kind of did a bit of a look around, and but it was obviously it's on people's minds. Like in the bookshop, there's at least 4 different books that have already been published of people's accounts, people's pulling it apart and thinking what's going on, eyewitnesses, and so the language they typically use is outpouring. They're kind of hesitant to use the word revival because revival tends to have a massive socio-cultural change over many, many years. And it's kind of like, it's a bit too early to say that that's necessarily happening. But it seems that something significantly spiritual happened during this 16 days, that people felt close to God, that God was doing something very special. A couple of the accounts talk about it being a thin place between, heaven and earth where the Spirit was particularly known. One of the couple of things that people reflect on is just it was very exciting that it was particularly Gen Z, who's typically very cynical generation, not very religious generation, were driving this. There was a real move away from anything sort of celebrity about it. So they wouldn't let people on stage if they were basically if you were known. Whereas kind of again, some sort of, baby boomer, seeker sensitive type Christianity was all about, who's the biggest superstar? Let's get the superstar up on stage, get them to preach. They're like, no, if you've got a platform, we don't want you. They would have, worship teams come through, but they would take them into, in a kind of a more slick church, might be kind of a green room type thing where you get prepared. But they would, I can't remember the term they used for it. They called it consecration space. And so they would get these worship teams, like if you're going to come and lead us in worship, I want you to come into this space and just spend an hour in self-reflection and prayer before you get up to lead anything. So it was try to be really humble and honest, lots of confession, lots of prayers of commitments and stuff as well. So yeah, it seems as if God was doing something over these 16 days at this place. And yeah, so I got to sort of see where that happened and look around, and it's exciting. Talk to my mate Henry, who's, as I said, on the sociology department, and so he was just telling me about his reflections because he was there during that time, and so it's cool. Like, I mean, God doesn't. There's nothing particularly special about Asbury or about. I mean, Wilmore, certainly there's nothing special about this town. But, God in his freedom seems to have done something particular there. And let's go, great. I mean, amazing. That's cool. And then there's a mixture of stories as well. So Henry was telling me about, he knows one girl who was feeling really dry and really flat in her faith, and she came so that she could experience something and didn't. And so now she's like, maybe this whole Christianity thing is not true. So she walked away from God. So, like there's all these great stories. And then you've got people who also, like, I don't know, tying their faith to the ability to have experience.
Yeah.
And she was one example of someone who didn't experience anything, didn't feel warm and fuzzy and close to God, and didn't have any experiential stuff, and thought, therefore God's not real, or I can't be a Christian, or I must not have faith, and so walked away from Jesus. So you've kind of got those stories as well, which is interesting. And so, to be in that place was really cool. And it just, from what I saw over a couple of days, I mean, school's not on at the moment for them. It's their summer, so it's a big summer break. There's only a few kind of graduate students, postgraduate students hanging around using the library. But from what I can see, that they seem to be doing a good job at the university, raising disciples who love Jesus and want to take that out to the world, whether it be in science and art and architecture and all the things they do at the university, or whether it be the seminary and raising up, ministers and people, missionaries. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, as we come to the end of the podcast, I was going to ask you, what's your takeaways when you come back from going to Intergenerate?
Intergenerate, yeah.
Intergenerate, being in Kentucky, roundabouts.
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken and tater tots. That's
tater tots, yeah. And Noah's Ark. We didn't talk about Noah's Ark, but I visited Noah's Ark.
Do you want to talk about that?
No, not really.
Okay.
But it was fun.
You went and visited the real life.
The real Noah's Ark. Yeah, they found it encased in ice, and they
moved it there.
They moved it to Kentucky.
Yeah. Airlifted it out of somewhere in the Middle East.
Yeah. No, there's it's called the Ark Encounter.
Is it like a theme park? Is that what it is?
A little bit, yeah. So Guy Ken Ham, who's an Australian actually, who's a big sort of 6-day creational science kind of thing, has built this to scale ark. It's kind of cool. It's to scale. It's cool. Like I mean, it's an impressive structure, and to walk around inside, and I don't think I necessarily agree with all the creational science kind of stuff and the strict 6-day creation thing, though I'm also not a scientist. So I don't know, I mean, there's part of me that's agnostic and I don't care. But what I was challenging myself with as I was walking around was just to humbly go, isn't it amazing that there are people who love God and love his word and want to take it really seriously, and this is the way that they express that. And so I bought myself a little ark. Just like,
but it is.
Yeah,
oh yeah, it's enormous. Like it's like four stories high, and you walk around, and they've got little exhibits in there of like they've got animatronic, Noah's family doing stuff, building stuff. Like it's a little bit theme parky. There's a whole zoo that's kind of attached to it, with different animals and whatnot. It was an experience. I'm glad I went. I wasn't quite sure, and I was texting with Roz, and I was like, "Oh, you may never go back to Kentucky. Why don't you just see it while you're
check
there?
it out? Yeah.
Check it out." So I'm glad I went. It was good.
It's massive. It's massive how big they've built it.
Yeah.
If it is to scale, like you're saying.
Yeah, and they're also quite open about the imagination that they've had to use as well. So,
I saw the interior of it. I'm like, I don't know if that's not in the Bible. Is it?
Well, and this is their thing. Like, and there's little plaques as you go around. You read all the stuff, and they're like, the Bible gives us a length, a breadth, and a width, which doesn't actually tell us anything about the design.
Yeah.
And they've actually got this little diagram. Like you could have a cube, you could have a pyramid, you could have a sphere, all of which are the same length, breadth, and width. So just because you know 3 dimensions doesn't actually know the shape. So we've had to use creativity and imagination, and also ancient shipbuilding practices and stuff to go. It may have looked like that. We don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of we do know the dimensions, and we can be fairly confident we know what a cubit is. It's measured in cubits and what size that is. The scale itself is just pretty cool. So. Yeah.
Sorry, we left it at...
No, sorry, I distracted us.
No, that's just with the large arc.
The large boat.
How do you how is your ministry going to be impacted when you come back now that you are back? Sorry.
Yeah. In some ways, not a lot. In that a lot of the things that other people are talking about there are not the questions we're asking at Sorrow Bible. So I'm not sure that a lot of the stuff that I picked up or the people are talking about there are the same kind of conversations that we're thinking about having. So I think there's lots of benefit for us being there and sort of saying, hey, here's another way of doing things, and also just to kind of help flesh out the conversation in different ways. So I think it's important to be there and represent another way of doing intergenerational ministry. Like people who have listened to the Shock Absorber, the idea of moderate intergenerationality, those kinds of things, so talking those kind of stuff. There's little snippets of ideas, like one of the little nuggets that's stuck in my head is we sometimes talk about passing on the baton of leadership and how that's really unhelpful because if you're the one passing it on, you now no longer have value because you've passed on all the things that you were doing. And also the person who is receiving it has no value until they receive it. And so I thought, that was really helpful to think through, not using that language, but like just actually co-contributing. Like he said, some of the dangers is if you're the one who has the baton at the moment, you don't necessarily want to give it up because you know that your purpose and value in this congregation has finished as soon as you hand over leadership. So it stops you from sharing leadership, which also, and Stu's talked about this a lot, the whole idea, like no one takes you seriously till you're 40, kind of thing. And that's because, no one's passing you a baton, like no one's actually including you in significant contributive ways. And so that was one little nugget that just stuck in my head. It's not going to change anything that we do at Soul Revival, but it's just another piece of language for me to think about, mull over. I really enjoy the connections with people from all over the globe. Someone I only knew over sort of via online and Zoom, Sarah Holmes, she's doing some great stuff in the UK on family ministry, grandparent ministry. She's doing some really interesting things I want to look into further about maybe the way we can encourage grandparents to keep passing on faith to families. So, and I was thinking particularly this something I was thinking about. I was like, I can't maybe chat with Braden and Stu about the MCC congregation because there's a lot of grandparent age in that congregation, and so maybe some of the stuff that Sarah's doing might be helpful to think about. How do we help that generation and that congregation be faith shapers for subsequent generations, whether it's their own biological family or whether it's been spiritual grandparents. So there's some really cool stuff going on there that Sarah's doing that might be really helpful. And the other thing it's just super fun. Like these are just people that I just have a lot of fun, really enjoy. Everyone needs one of those friends that says, hey, you want to ditch the next session and go out and have adventures? And so got a couple of those mates that were just like, yeah, let's do that. So it's really fun. Normally that's Stu. Like Stu does that often at conferences. Like, hey, let's ditch this session and go and do something else. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's good to have a few of those people. But it's just a really great, I really enjoy being part of that community. And I find the variety really invigorating. People that we wildly disconnect in terms of theology, who are from denominations or have particular theologies that are just like, man, I can't go anywhere near that with you. But it's just like, but we're all here to talk about intergenerational ministry. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, I think my takeaway is it's really great to be part of this community. It's great to be sharing. It's great to be inputting. I just think it's really valuable for me, and trying to be someone who can sort of influence this, and from our perspective, I think is really fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, thank you, man.
No, thank you.
Thanks for coming on Chip Lunch again.
Yeah.
Maybe we could call it a trip to the US and your favourite dead Frenchman.
Yeah, that's right.
Your original one was it Christian School and your favourite dead Russian.
Oh, there you go. All right, perfect.
So it's straight into that.
That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Braden.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Joel.
Oh, you're welcome.
Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you,
Luca.
Thank you, Luca.
Yes.
On the desk.
Thank you, Braden.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Luca.
If anyone's still listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
If anyone's still listening, thank you. And we'll wrap it up there with the Chip Lunch podcast. We'll be back next week.
With some tater tots.
Yeah.
Wrap up the tater tots.
It is lunchtime.
It is lunchtime. Perfect time for that.
Let's go get some ludicrous
chicken and beer.
Chicken and beer.
Ludicrous. Yeah. Anyway, thanks everyone. We'll see you later.